to another episode of Power Move Makers. This series was created with a simple goal in mind. Bring to the table high-level executives, successful entrepreneurs, and just all-around inspiring human beings. Not just focusing on their successes, but more important, the road they traveled to get there. Now, this week's guest is a woman after my own heart. I love her unapologetic style of teaching, but I love even more that she's willing to teach. She's willing to educate and inspire and really give knowledge of everything that she's learned over her 20 plus years as a financial investor, a real estate mogul, a franchise owner. She has done so many things, but more important, she's an entrepreneur, and it just speaks to my soul. And I know that it will speak to the soul of so many of you guys who are watching this either on video form or podcast form. So please welcome to this week's Power Move Maker series, Miss Ayesha Selden. Aisha, what's up?
Hi, Shawn. How are you? Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited. And thank you for that great intro. That was awesome.
Now, I had to get you on the platform, Aisha. Thanks for taking time out. And, you know, it's so much that I want to discuss with you, but I'm inspired by people like you. And, you know, offline, we were talking about your unapologetic approach to educating and teaching. Yep. Where does that even come from?
I mean, a lot of it's my personality type. Just I'm very type A, you know, and like I told you a little bit earlier before we kicked off, I understand, respect, and appreciate that my personality type and how I deliver my message is not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. But I truly believe and value authenticity. So all I can do is be me. And when I try to tailor my message for everyone, I feel like I'm lacking because I'm not being my true and authentic self. Also, I say a lot that I came of age twice. One is a little Black girl in the hood who grew up running the streets of Passion Projects in South Philly. And then I came of age again in corporate America as a new stockbroker at 22. And one of my leaders was a retired Navy guy, and he was very regimented. He was very, so I learned both as a kid and as a new broker. And I think my style today is a reflection of both of those coming of age.
Understood. Take me back to the beginning for a second. Who is Aisha? Are you from a privileged family? I heard you talk about coming from the project, so we know that's not the case. But, you know, is it a two-family household? Like, what makes you you? Tell me about the early story of yourself.
You know, I think it's funny that you say that because I talk about a book I wrote. I say in there that I was blessed with love privilege, the privilege of love. I think I was probably the poorest child of a single teen mom, yet I still consider myself privileged because I had, I think, Shawn, far more than I think that most get, unfortunately. For a long time, I used to say, I'm self-made. You know what I mean? We all want to say I'm self-made. You know, I went from, you know, I can talk about the rags to riches story. I mean, we came from projects. My mom was 16 when she had my sister, 19 when she had me. She was single until I was 14, and then she married my stepdad. So I can talk about all of that. And I was second generation college educated, you know, and became a millionaire by the time I was 30. And a lot of people would call themselves self-made. And I used to for a long time, but I don't anymore because I do realize that I had advantages and opportunities that other people did not. I had a mom who loved her children, she still loves her children. I had a mom who, even though we lived in the hood, she would pack my sister and I in a car and drive us about 30 minutes outside of the city to one of the most affluent neighborhoods in the country. Philly has extreme poverty on one end, and then we have one of the most affluent suburbs in the country, the main line. And my mom would pack us in the car and take us out to Gladwin on weekends and say, like, this is how y'all are gonna live. Like, let's drive through the mansions of Gladwin, the mansions of Villanova, so that we could see in person, not just on TV, how the extremely affluent lived. And that was important to her. She took us places. We went to, you know, I mean, we weren't going like international, but we went to Florida as kids. I mean, we got to experience things that I think that a lot of people who come from the hood didn't. So I don't take that for granted. But that was us as kids. My mom was first generation college educated. She became an RN. I mean, having kids as a teen mom pushed her to want more for her life. And one of the reasons I believe that I am like I am, and want to give back, is because when my mom realized that she wanted more for her life. I mean, you know, this was back in the 70s, 80s. The crack epidemic was hitting hard in Philly, just like it did in New York. My mom went back and pulled a lot of her friends, like, out of crack houses. Like, y'all gonna stay with us until you can get yourselves together. So it wasn't uncommon for me as a kid, you know, my sister and I as kids, to like come downstairs one morning and it's like 9 people in our kitchen. We had a small house, but, you know, mom was gonna make sure that her friends were okay, her community, you know, was okay, our aunties that she grew up with were okay. So so I had a great childhood, a lot of love, a lot of laughter, but still much very, very hood.
You know, it's 2 parts of what you just said that really sticks out for me. One is your mom had a first child at 16 years old, second child, which is yourself, at 19.
Yep.
If you are watching this, if you are listening to this in podcast form, stay with me for a second. You are greater than what some would consider to be your biggest mistake at the time. Having a child at 16 years old, still being in high school, do you know how many women are told it's over? Don't do this, your life is over. And then to have a second child before the age of 20.
Yep.
I don't know what her support system was, but I do understand the magnitude of responsibility that comes with having 2 children. At that point, I'm assuming she's out of wedlock, don't know what the support system looks like, but still picks herself up and goes off and gets a college education and becomes an RN. I love that because you can bounce back. You don't have to just accept your circumstances as they are. And even when things look like all of the chips are stacked against me, it's a choice. She made a choice to continue to grow despite what others might have said. And I'm sure it wasn't her thoughts, but others might have said having a child this early is a mistake. So that really sticks out to me. And then second, which I love, your mother had the foresight. Although she could not afford to live in these affluent neighborhoods, she took her children and drove through. And now it's not just talking. I want you guys to see. I want you to visualize. I want you to smell the air. See yourselves living here because it's possible. She didn't just keep you in the projects and talk to you about there's a better life out there somewhere. I love that she took that extra step to show you guys. And obviously, you're living proof of it. So please, no matter what your circumstances are, financially or otherwise, go and put yourself in the position that you ultimately want to be in. It does wonders for you.
You know, Shawn, I'm so glad you said that. And clearly we know that's not the ideal circumstance. It's not ideal to be a mom of 2 before you're 20, right? It's not ideal. But at the same time, and I was talking to someone on Twitter and she was kind of like barking at me about the perspective of the kid that I was, who, you know, was a kid of a teen mom. I mean, my sister and I had the same kindergarten teacher. Like, you know, we're that close in age, right? So what I said to her was, you know, even though it's not ideal, don't get me wrong, as a kid of a teen mom, my mom had the energy of like 10 moms. You know what I mean? When I was ripping and running the streets at 8, you know, she wasn't even 30 yet. She could run faster than I could.
That's right.
You know, she had all the smoke and energy of, like, you know, I would be like out doing something I had no business doing. She could come work a 12-hour, 14-hour shift as an RN and come home and still drag me, still make sure that my schoolwork was done. Like, so again, while it's not the ideal circumstance, there are absolutely advantages. My mom had my brother much later in life. She had my brother at 36. And the energy that she had for my sister and I, like, you know, where she, you know, we could get all the smoke and like, you know, she was a totally different mom by the time she was 36 and had my brother. You know, she didn't have, thankfully she had us who could also be on him. But there are certainly advantages of being young and energetic. Use that young energy and invest it into yourself and your children.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Education. Let's stick to that for a second. Where'd you go to school?
For college, I went to Temple University along with my mom. So my mom is an RN. And again, this is where I talk about privileges that I've had that not everyone else was afforded. So my mom became an RN at Temple. So my sister and I both got to go to college. We went to Temple for free. And keep in mind, I went to Temple University in 1996, when I think at the time, tuition was like $5,000 a year. So my entire college education was $20,000, which today, I think the cost of Temple is probably double or triple that. Mm-hmm. So both my sister and I, we both got undergrad degrees from Temple. My sister actually later went on to get her nursing degree as well, much later in her career.
Before I move further, again, because I want to help people understand, it doesn't matter where you start. Where you start, that's, it just circumstance. It is what it is. But where you end off, that's choice. That's up to you. So you went to Temple, I'm assuming public school before then, correct?
Yes and no. So from kindergarten through 5th grade, my sister and I went to an all-black Catholic school in South Philly, the same one my mom went to. It doesn't exist today, but I mean, tuition was relatively cheap at the time. We're talking back in the early 80s. So we went to Catholic school. I went kindergarten through 5th. My sister went kindergarten through 8th. And then I went to public high school in Philadelphia, actually one of the best high schools in Philadelphia, Central High School. So it was a college prep high school. My mom was very, very strict on us about our schoolwork and academics. I mean, my mom was the mom that, you could get all A's, and if you got 1 B and 1 C, she'd be like, well, why didn't you tell me you were struggling and needed tutoring? Like, you know what I mean? I'd see my friends coming home with straight C's and 1 D, and mom's like, high five, we ain't failing, baby. But we come home with 1 C, and mom was like, what seems to be rough. But at the same time, she was also very rewarding. I remember her knowing what incented her children. I've always been very money motivated. Like, you throw me a couple of dollars and I'm gonna make it happen. So she used to for our report cards give us $10 for every A, $5 for every B. You got nothing for a C. So I would strive to make sure that I got paid every report card.
I mean, as a young kid, $10 for every A, that adds up.
That adds up. Back in the 80s, what? That was like big money.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you said you were very money focused.
Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah.
Is that where your career you're a licensed stockbroker, correct?
I am 20 years. Yeah.
Okay. So you getting into this industry, into this field, that's not by accident, I'm assuming.
It's not by accident. I believe it's by purpose and design for my life. And, like no one in my family, myself included, no one is surprised at who I am today. No one's like, wait, Aisha? Like, not that little, I mean, this is who I was as a kid. I was a kid, and I talk about it. And I've talked about it on podcasts and in my book. My mom sent me to a Christian camp when I was a kid. She sent me with $200. I was probably 13 or so. And our responsibility, housing was taken care of. Our responsibility was to pay for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 5 days, plus trinket souvenirs, whatever we wanted to get. She sent me with $200, and I came home showing with $175 after 5 days. So in 5 days, I spent only $25. Listen, ain't nobody get a T-shirt, no cup, no magnet. You get nothing. I came home $175, put it in the shoebox, and slid it under my bed, and was like, "We rich out here." So I've always been extremely money motivated. Which at the same time, for a poor kid in the hood, is a gift and a curse. Because you're from New York, I'm from Philly. Back in the day, like, the wealthiest people that were in our community, and again, I was driven by money and wealth, the wealthiest people in our community that we saw, that we knew personally, they were drug dealers. Correct. Right? So, I'll never forget my first job was at McDonald's, which was in South Philly in my neighborhood. And I'll never forget, like me and a friend, we cooked up a plan. Because I'd saved my paychecks. I was going to buy the weed. She was going to distribute it at the school. We had a whole little like a whole plan mapped out. And I'll never forget, again, this is privilege. This is the privilege I'm talking about. So again, poor kid, single mom, teen mom. But again, I'm talking the privilege I had. My mom came in my bedroom and was like, I don't know what's going on. Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't do it. Like, and I hadn't told anybody in my family that would have told my mom, right? She comes in my bedroom one day. She's like, whatever you're thinking about doing, I don't know what it is. I don't know. Like, it's just like, basically it's all up in my spirit. Like, whatever you're about to do, don't do it. And I'm 16, 17. I ain't gonna act like I know what she's talking about. I'm like, really? What happened? Who did it? So, and when she left, I just sat there and kind of thought about, like, this could be one of those moments that defines my life. And I truly believe that it was. I mean, because whatever I do, I go all out. You know what I mean? Like, whatever I do, I'm gonna be. Listen, I would have been the best drug dealer in Southfield. I would have been a Griselda Blanc. I'd have took the whole country down. Everybody would have been on crack rock eventually. I'd have been. So whatever I pursue, I'm gonna pursue it to the fullest. And I remember sitting there thinking, I'm not gonna do it. You know what I mean? Because just her coming into my room, and I still don't know. And I've mentioned this on several podcasts. I don't know if I've actually told her this story, but I truly believe that was one of the defining and pivotal moments of my life. So I think that there were so many different things that aligned and happened and were orchestrated just by purpose and design to get me to where I am. I mean, Shawn, even going as far as my very first boss at 16, he worked for a franchise owner. And back then in South Philly, it was the wild, wild west. You had franchise owners that were doing things illegally. I was 16 in high school, working probably 45 hours a week at work. Like, you know what I mean? Like I come home, like straight home, like change, hit McDonald's. I'd be working there till closing. I'd work all weekend, like totally illegal for a 16-year-old, right? So the guy who was the general manager of the store was a big, like 6'5" dude. And when I tell you, Shawn, he used to cuss us out like we were grown men. I mean, like I'm 16, and I mean, you drop a hash brown, he is, pardon my French, he in your ass. Like, I will you up in here. Like, so, and I'll never forget the first time he did it. And I'm like, yo, like, I went to the coat room, I cried. I'm like, I could either tell my mom, right? And she gonna make me quit. Or I can like suck it up and get back out there. Like, I did this $4.25 an hour. That's good money. Like, I need this money. So, I did. I sucked it up and I got back out there. And the reason I say that, and that's abuse. I mean, like, it ended up being, again, by purpose and design in my life, because as a new stockbroker, as a young stockbroker, if you've watched any movies on being a stockbroker, one of the very first things that you do, if you've ever seen the movie like Boiler Room, for example, you're literally at 22 or 23 in a bullpen or in a room of other new stockbrokers, and you're pounding the phones. All you're doing is calling people over and over and over and over again. And you know how it is when you get telemarketing calls. And back then, there was no caller ID. We're talking late 90s, early 2000s. There was no caller ID. So people were, people still had home phones. Some people didn't even have cell phones. So you could reach people, when you're dialing at night. And I was just dialing for dollars. And people used to rip me a new one on that phone. And keep in mind the experiences that I'd already had. At 16, I'm being cussed out in my face. But I'm 5'2". I'm being cussed out in my face by a 6'5" big dude, like, who's bending over me, telling me there's not a thing you can tell me on this phone that's going, like, so you want these mutual funds or not, sis? I'm trying to help you out. Like, you can't cuss me out effectively enough to convince me that, like, I need to stop doing what I'm doing. So, again, all the various things that have happened in my life were, I believe, instrumental in getting me to just where I am. And I didn't know any stockbrokers. You know what I mean? When I first went to Temple, I was heavily influenced by the movie Boomerang. Right. So I'm about to apply to college. Boomerang was in my late teens, one of the most popular movies out there. And I remember that was one of the first movies where it wasn't like blaxploitation. We saw Black people like getting it. You know what I mean? Like Marcus Graham had a penthouse. You know what I mean? Like they had, right. Like everybody was wealthy, was getting it. And they were all in advertising, marketing. So when I applied at Temple, my very first major was marketing, just because I'm like, all right, like Black people can apparently get it in the ad space. So let me, I'll do that. And then I remember like just going along, and I remember having a lot of enthusiasm in my finance and my economics classes, and then literally bumped into a friend, asked her what she was going to do after college. She had an interview with, at the time it was American Express. They had a financial advisors division. And I'm like, well, give me the number. Let me call the manager and see if I can get an interview as well. And that's how I ended up being a stockbroker.
It's crazy because you hit on so many great points. I could pull out 50, but I'm gonna zone in on one because I do this every single chance that I get. Trust the process.
Trust it.
It's simple as that.
Trust it. Yep.
Trust the process.
Yep.
You talking about being a 22-year-old stockbroker, cold calling people, getting cursed out, but you were prepared for it from the most unlikely of places.
Yeah.
And, here you are, this young girl being cursed out by a 6'5" boss of yours.
Yep.
Literally gave you the tough skin and the tenacity that you didn't know one day was going to come into play and allow you to be successful in your chosen career. But what that man did to you, abuse in the hall, prepared you for when you sat down on those phones. And like you said, there wasn't enough cuss outs. There wasn't enough hanging the phone up in your face. There wasn't enough people going off on you that could keep you from doing the job because you were already prepared for it. So whatever you're going through, trust the process. Trust me when I tell you, I cannot emphasize this enough. God does not randomly put you in situations. They are all designed purposefully, divinely, that will one day help you in your future. So whatever you're going through, the Bible always says, in all things give thanks. Just give God thanks, even if you don't understand it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's talk about investing for a second.
Yeah.
Was it something that you were immediately good at? Is there a learning curve there? And I'm asking you this for a reason. Everybody thinks, we live in a society where everybody, number one, is a boss. And everybody feels that success is supposed to happen right away. Now, granted, you said, look, I became a millionaire by 30.
Yep.
So we know that's in the cards for you. But when you first started out, talk to me about the learning curve. Talk to me about keeping your head low and just learning before you were able to really go and make the kind of money that you eventually made.
Yep. So that's a great question. I had to learn trial just by going through the fire, trial by fire. I was a horrible investor when I first started. And even having studied all of the exams and licenses that I needed to become a licensed stockbroker, my Series 7, my Series 66, my Pennsylvania Life and Health, all the exams still didn't prepare me to be a good investor. Largely because, like everyone else, my very first mutual fund actually was before I became a broker. My very first mutual fund was in 1999. It was a technology mutual fund. And I bought it because there was so much hype surrounding it. Like, I don't know if you remember the late 90s, it was like the .com era.
Yep,
we were just getting like, Netscape and AOL. I mean, like technology stocks were going crazy. And I remember thinking, like, I want in on some of that money. Like, I want like that's fast money. That thing went up a couple 100%. Like it was going nuts. It was going crazy. Kind of like Tesla was just recently when everybody jumped on a bandwagon. But that's a separate story. So I bought my very first mutual fund, and within 6 months of buying the thing, I lost 70% of my entire investment. 70%. Wow. And I'm glad it happened. I'm glad it happened. And the subsequent chases that I went through after that, I lost my investment on those. I remember I was investing big in one of the satellite radio companies. I think it was Sirius Satellite Radio at the time. And that was the new hype. And I went running into the hype, and it took me years of getting burned over and over and over again to actually finally listen to a gentleman named Warren Buffett, who's arguably one of the greatest investors alive. And he said something like, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful, right? So basically what I had to learn was when everyone's running in a building, there's a problem. It's problematic. When your Uber driver starts asking you about Tesla, like it's probably it's a hype at this point. When everybody wants in on something, it may be a bubble at that point. And I had to learn to basically do what feels counterintuitive to survival. And anybody would say to you, Shawn, when it comes down to investing, how do you make money in an investment? Any investment, stocks, real estate, how do you make money? You buy it at a lower price, right? And if it's real estate, you do some value add, you collect some rents, whatever, you sell it at a higher price, right? That's how you make money in real estate. In stocks, I buy a stock at a lower price, right? It may kick off a dividend, and I sell it at a higher price, right? You buy low, you sell high. In its most simple form, I buy low, I sell high, right? That's how you make money. So when our emotions are not involved, right? When there's no, we take the behavioral finance out of it, I buy low, sell high, that's how I make money. However, when it comes down to our actual money, when we apply our emotions to how we invest, when it's our dollars and cents on the line, we do the exact opposite of how you make money in the stock market, right? A stock goes up 200%, 300%. That look like a good investment. Let me get in on that. I want that thing now, right? I buy it when it's high. And then when it plummets, like, oh, maybe that wasn't a good idea. It plummets, and that's when I sell it. We literally just saw that with Tesla. Tesla went up like 500% in a matter of a year, like, which is just insane. And people are like, at the peak of it, yeah, that looks like a good investment. I want it. After it went up 500%, bro, seriously? Were you thinking about it back when the stock market, during their collapse back in March of 2020? Were you looking at it in April when it was still really low? Or once it skyrocketed, that's when you wanted to buy it. And when it plummeted subsequently after the split, I mean, it dropped 20% just yesterday, single largest drop ever, which means that there were a lot of people selling it. So what I believe is you had a lot of traders who bought the thing a week ago or 2 weeks ago, just on the news of the split, and then watched this thing drop 20% in one day. It dropped last trading day as well. And then people started panicking and selling it. So that's my philosophy is much more today, much more of a disciplined way of investing. I do what feels counterintuitive to survival. When something gets beat up, that's when I run in. After everyone's panicking and selling, when there are a lot of sellers, when there's what they call in Wall Street blood in the streets, that's when I swoop in, right? And I tend to hold a really, really long time. I buy really good companies. I don't speculate. I don't pick penny stocks thinking this thing's gonna go up 1,000%. I said to someone on one of the socials the other day that trying to pick one of those penny stocks that will ultimately become or transform or turn into an Amazon or an Apple or a Netflix, that's almost like going to a Pee-wee league and trying to pick out specifically which 7-year-old is gonna make it to the NFL.
Correct.
The likelihood that any of them are going to make it is slim to none, right? So statistically, none of them are going to make it. But then to be able to look at a kid and say, yeah, I think that kid right there is going to make it to the NFL, chances are it will not happen. You will not be able to make that call. So I buy good companies, valuable companies. I like companies that pay dividends. I like companies that are cheap, not according to share price, because most of us just look at share price and think, well, if the share price is low, that means the stock is cheap. Share price is irrelevant, which most people don't even quite comprehend. Like share price doesn't mean a thing. When Tesla split 5-for-1, the company didn't become cheaper just because the share price did. The company didn't become more valuable because the share price split or the stock split. So that's how I approach investing today, by doing almost the exact opposite of what the masses are doing.
You said something I want to shine a light on. You took some amazing advice from somebody you never met before, in Warren Buffett.
Yep.
Mentors. Did you have a mentor alongside of you? And I ask you this because there's somebody who is living in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And 9 out of 10, they are not going to have an uber successful person that they can reach out to, get on the phone, ask questions, get advice from. But your mentors don't necessarily have to be in your immediate proximity to give you the wisdom and advice that you need. You're living proof. You just quoted, and I'm sure, I have to believe that you had mentors along the line who worked in the office, in that bullpen right next to you, hopefully. Yep. But Warren Buffett, one of the baddest guys to ever do it.
Yep.
He was somebody who mentored you from afar. So can you speak, before I move this on, just to the fact that mentorship doesn't necessarily have to be someone who is in the same room with you?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's Shawn. That's such a great point. I've never been in the same room as Warren Buffett. Never. I've never attended one of his annual meetings, the Berkshire Hathaway meetings, which are like infamous now.
Yep.
But just reading his story, reading about him, literally any publication I could get my hands on that had his name on it, I was devouring it. And keep in mind, this was 20 years ago. So I was a new broker. Information was not as easily accessible as it is today. There were no iPhones back in 2000 when I was just getting started out as a new broker. Today, I mean, hell, you can be in one place and have a mentor completely around the world. Like, you can follow them on Twitter. You know, like you can literally have direct access to, through social media, through, you know, booking consult calls. There's so much information that we have access to that I didn't have. I mean, as a new broker, I was sharing a computer just to send out like confirmation letters with like 12 other brokers. Like, you know, it was like using a payphone in prison, basically. Like, you know, your time is up, sis. Get up. You know what I mean? So, you know, there were far fewer ways that we got information back then as opposed to today. I mean, I even remember when I wanted to get into investing in real estate heavily. I mean, I bought my first property in 2002, but I wanted to really, really kick off when the market plummeted back in 2008. And again, I'd learned by 2008, you do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. So when the real estate market crashed in 2008, I watched it fall in 2008, like really crash in 2009. I think the Philly market bottomed like right around 2010, 2011. And there were so few investors that were out investing in real estate at the time for a variety of reasons. Fear, thinking, well, you know, is this thing going to keep falling? Credit was tight. A lot of lenders weren't out there. So I remember thinking, now is my time to strike. Now that the masses aren't buying real estate like they were back in 2003, 4, 5, when you could do these no-doc loans. Literally everyone was investing in real estate. And I remember at the time, Facebook was pretty big then. And I reached out to a guy I knew who was a big real estate investor. And he and I went to high school together. And I DM'd him like, listen, like, you know, I'll pay for your time. I'll take you out to lunch, like whatever we have to, like, I just want to pick your brain at my expense. I will, you know, I believe in honoring someone's time. Can I just, like, you know, get some information from you? Dude never responded. Like, left me on red. Like straight up, like, you know. And I said, like, for a lot of people, that's discouraging. You know, they reach out to people that they look up to on socials, or they reach out to people and they either don't get a response or don't get the response that they're looking for, and they use that as an opportunity to say, you know what, this is just not for me. I had the exact opposite. I said, okay, like, you gonna leave me on red like that? I now own far more real estate than he does. So for me, that was inspiring. You know, it's okay if someone doesn't give you the information that you want, or the information that you're looking for, or the mentor that's in your head, or your best friend in your head isn't responding to your inquiries. Do it anyway. Figure it out anyway. There's so much information, either through podcasts, business publications. I mean, the YouTube, I mean, the internet is just a plethora of great information.
You know, this is a great segue into your real estate. You know, it's crazy because you are wildly successful in real estate investments. But that's not even your day job. Your day job, we just spent some time on.
Yeah.
So it's you know, it goes to number one, and we're going to get into how well you've done in real estate. But it goes to my point. If you want to be successful, here is your first rule. There are more than 8 hours in a day. You are listening and watching a woman who has a full-time job, a full-time career as an investor in the market.
Right.
But you have found time to build a real estate portfolio of how many buildings do you own now?
So I just sold one actually today. It's actually the second property I ever bought. So I bought it in 2004, and 16 years later, just sold it and cleared a nice little profit on it. So I'm now down to 30 buildings, some of which are single family, and some of which are multifamily. So I think I'm up to just short of about 50 units total, 50 doors, because some are single, a lot of them are single, and some of them are multifamilies.
Okay, before we go deep into it, it seems like you have the same philosophy across the investing in the market as you have in real estate. You said that you just sold a property today that was the second property you ever bought back in '04.
Yep.
Is it that same mentality that you were talking about earlier in the stock market, where you buy it and no matter how the market goes, whether it goes up, it goes down, no matter the fluctuation, you're in it for the long haul. You're not necessarily flipping properties, correct?
No, I don't. I was actually reluctant to sell this. So when I bought this in 2004, I bought it with another stockbroker. He and I worked together. And he's wanted to sell it for years. He's wanted to sell it for a number of years, and we had long-term tenants there. And I said, I was able to use that as leverage. Like, look, we don't have to put very little, we put very little capital into this. The tenants are paying down the mortgage, effectively putting money in our pockets every single month. So, let's reconvene when the long-term tenants leave. And they did, they finally moved out. So I was like, all right, fine, we can sell it. And I would have bought it out from him, but I like being in the hood. Like that's where I like most of my real estate, which, you know, it's interesting because you watch a lot of these podcasts, which I won't name them, but I you know, because I'd be bashing them. But
feel free. I'm perfectly fine with it.
Okay, cool. Bigger Pockets, for example, which tends to have a lot of investors who do not look like us. I mean, I've heard investors on the Bigger Pockets podcast say, like, don't invest in the ghetto. You know, you'll have like trashy tenants and trash your house. Like, basically, you know, part of my friends shitting on marginalized communities, right? Mm-hmm. That's my preferred place to invest. I love investing in areas where people who are Black and brown deserve to not have abandoned homes on their blocks, you know, that have been abandoned and dilapidated for 20 or 30 years, right? So this particular property that we were selling was in the suburbs. So I don't really want to be in the suburbs. I only have two outliers outside of, two rentals outside of the city of Philadelphia. So this was one of them. So I was actually okay about selling it, and I'll put that capital somewhere else. And I still have one more property that's outside of city limits. But you know, if it were in Philly, if it were in the hood, I actually would have bought him out. But I tend to hold things a really, really long time. And again, Shawn, this goes back to what we talked about earlier. Our experiences and everything happens by divine purpose. A part of the reason that I was so interested in real estate really early on is because I've got the story that so many people who look like you and I, so many Black and brown people, have had auntie sell their house or grandma sell their house, and then suddenly the neighborhood gets gentrified, right? Yep. That happened to me. So when we lived in South Philly, we left Passion Projects. We lived in a part of South Philly that was relatively close to downtown Philly. And my first year in college, we were moving to a bigger house. My mom had my brother, she got married. My grandmother came and lived with us. So we needed more space. In South Philly, the houses are pretty small. And I remember telling my mom, I said, Mom, don't sell this house. I got a good feeling about this neighborhood. We're in walking distance to downtown Philly. It's rough now. So we lived in a house, but there was a housing project directly around the corner. We called the neighborhood Saigon. I mean, it was rough as shit, right? So, but I told her, I said, look, it's rough now, but I got a good feeling about it. So she got nervous. We were buying a house in Germantown, and she got nervous and decided to sell the house. And she sold it for, I want to say like $35,000 or $40,000. It was like a pretty low amount. And within 10 years, that house was easily in as-is condition, or the condition we left it in was probably easily worth $500,000 just based on the location. Neighborhood had completely changed. I mean, parks.
10 years?
Within 10 years.
Wow. Dog
parks, cafes. I mean, like all the good stuff, you know, like, you know, they was over there living. They had torn down that housing project, made it green space. And I remember when I saw the neighborhood changing, I remember thinking, this will never happen to my family again. My family and whatever legacy that is in my blood, we will never be in a position where we sold an asset that I knew we should have held on to and passed down generation after generation. So that for me, when I became a licensed broker, real estate was always in the back of my mind. Like, okay, I'm an investor, period. You know, stocks are my first love, but you know, I'm gonna own some property. I'm gonna own some land. I remember reading a book, because I'm an avid reader, and I think it was one of Toni Morrison's books. And she talked about, like, people always need a place to live and a place to die, right? So for me, and Oprah says one of my favorite quotes by her. She said something like, "I love land the way most women love shoes," right? So when you think about, like, when I think about land, when I think about people always needing a place to live, I mean, for me, real estate always just made sense. So even though I was investing in stocks, I was thinking eventually I was going to get into real estate, and I was going to have revenge for future generations and future legacies on that house we sold. So because of that, I almost never sell my real estate. Like I had a small, like, I felt a little bit some kind of way when I was in closing, like, you know, we selling this house and I don't really dig it, but the fact that it's in the suburbs, the fact that I'm going to net a good profit, the fact that I've held it, you know, over a decade, and made good money on it. But I will think about that house forever. Like I'll think about the house I grew up in, you know, the one in South Philly that my mom sold. I will never forget that house, and I will never forget that lesson. So that's to me why real estate has always been something that's been interesting to me. It was a passion of mine. So going back into communities that look like the one that I grew up in. So in 2011, when I decided to really get busy in real estate, I went slightly south of where we sold that house. So we sold that house in South Philly. And at the time in 2011, kind of the rule was don't go south of Washington Avenue, right? It was like, so north of Washington was like nice and, you know, safer and cleaner. And they were like, yeah, don't go south of Washington because it's rough and you'll get, and I'm like, I'm from rough. You know what I mean? Like, what we talking? So, and I also remember thinking there's no physical barrier that will prevent people from coming south of Washington. You people are idiots. Like, you know, if north of Washington becomes far too expensive, eventually what the heck do you think is going to happen? People will start to move south of Washington. Like that didn't take, and people are like, you know, well, how did you know? It didn't take rocket science. Eventually, like, people are going to run out of opportunities north of Washington. So I bought south of Washington, and eventually, of course, the wave gradually came south of Washington. So houses in 2011 that I was buying for $50,000. One of my houses, most houses in Philly share a party wall. They're row houses or townhouses, whatever you want to call them. I remember the first one I bought, I paid $56,000 for. I share a party wall with a house that just sold for a year ago, sold for $450,000, I believe. Incredible. So not only have I collected rent on the thing for 8-9 years, but I mean, the thing has gone up in value, just a ridiculous amount of money. So real estate is probably my favorite asset class now. I mean, I love stocks, but I love how predictable real estate is. I like the fact that you can insure against, you know, real estate. And typically all the folks that tell you, you know, you see a lot of real estate bashing on social media, like, oh, I had a bad experience as a landlord. Oh, that was probably some mistakes that you made. So there are things that we can do to protect ourselves as landlords and as real estate investors, which is one of the reasons why my burgeoning hobby, which was buying houses, ended up being, you know, a multi-million-dollar business at this point.
The world is in a very peculiar place. I don't know how else to say it. Right now, the market is way up. Mm-hmm. But you would also think that with COVID, the real estate market would be down, but that's way up.
Yeah. So
what do you attribute this? I mean, it goes against everything that we think we know, because this is not, it's not a mirror image of 08, 09, 10, 11. Yep. Although some, you know, we're in a recession. So why is everything up at this moment, in your opinion?
Yeah, you're talking my language, Shawn. So a couple things. One of the reasons why I was willing to sell the house today, two reasons: one, location; the other, liquidity. And a part of the reason I wanted access to more liquidity, more capital, is because I believe that there are reasons why the real estate market should be lower than it is today. You know, I mean, you like, even though over the last couple of months, forbearance for folks that are like not paying their mortgage has gone down over the last couple of months. It's not as high as it was when COVID first hit, or around the spring or early summer. However, there are still a lot of homeowners in mortgage forbearance, right? So that could possibly trigger a lot of foreclosures, which we know what that does to the real estate market. There are two reasons why I believe that the real estate market today is basically where it was pre-COVID. One, you've got very little inventory that's on the market for sale in a lot of markets, right? So I was reading an article a couple of months ago that said that the inventory that was for sale in Philly was roughly half of what it was this time last year. So when you've got significantly fewer homes in the market, I mean, think about it, Shawn. If you didn't have to sell your house, right? If you didn't have to go, would you put your house on the market, have folks, strangers coming in and out of your house all day, they touching your stuff, coughing, some kids running around your house, like, during the showings? So folks that don't have to sell because they're required to, or they can't afford it. So folks that don't have to sell they're not listing their houses. So because there are fewer properties on the market, low inventory, that keeps prices relatively stable. I mean, there are bidding wars going on right now. Like, you get one property that comes on the market that meets all of your criteria. My realtor told me today that a house that recently listed where the one that I just sold was, there were 70 offers on that property. 70, because there's so few properties that are on the market. So when you get a halfway decent one, folks are like, I need that one. So you got so many people who are bidding. The other thing is, or the other reason why property values haven't declined drastically is because interest rates are at historically low levels. I mean, it's insane. I remember the very first property, and I had great credit. The very first property that I bought, my interest rate was like 7.5%, 7.6%. We're talking early 2000s, 20 years ago. I've seen people today refinancing or doing 30-year fixed mortgages sub 3, under 3%. So when interest rates are that low, when inventory is that low, I believe that's why home values have not only stayed the same, but in a lot of cases, in a lot of markets, they've actually gone up. What will happen if tenants continue to not pay their rent? What will happen if owners continue to not pay their mortgages? That could drive values. That could drive values down. And not that I'm hoping for that, but as an investor, if it happens, I want to be prepared for that opportunity, which is a part of the reason why I wanted a little bit more capital to be able to take advantage of it if that does happen.
What are some criteria that you live by before investing in any property?
You like, I like you, Shawn. You were talking my language. I have two questions I ask myself, and I call it my litmus test. You have to get through these two questions. The very first question I have, because I told you I invest in marginalized communities. I invest in the hood. But Shawn, I'm from the hood. If you're from New York, you know what hoods look like. There are pockets of the hood where you're like, yeah, no, you don't go there.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like I remember I was going to invest in Baltimore, and there were most parts of Baltimore. I was like, I can rock with this. This reminds me of Philly. There was one part of Baltimore where I was basically looking at that agent like, sis, you can slow this car down if you want to. Like, you get out. I'm jumping behind that wheel. I'm taking off. Like, it looked like scenes fresh out of The Wire. Like, there's no way I'm living. So the two questions I have for myself is, one, can I imagine a reasonable mother raising her children in this area, on this block? Right? Would a reasonable mom feel comfortable raising her kids here? Reasonable, right?
That's the underlying word. Let's highlight that. Reasonable. Reasonable, right. Like, I'm not saying I would live there. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. If push came to shove, I would live at most of my properties. But would a reasonable mom feel comfortable raising her kids here, right? If the answer to that question is no, like, who in their right mind would live here? I don't even get that. Well, there's nothing else for us to discuss. Like, I don't need to know what the returns look like. I don't need to know, because as a long-term landlord, and keep in mind, I want to hold my investments a really, really long time, right? I'm not dancing on the first of every month with someone who you can't even be in your right mind to live there, right? We're not doing this dance every month, because I don't want to be in a business relationship, a long-term relationship with someone where you got to be crazy just to live there. I mean, it's wild over there. So that's my first question. So the answer to that question is yes. The second question that I finally get to, if I can answer yes to number one, is how long is it going to take me to get my capital back? So in my mind, I compare all investments to how well the U.S. stock market does. And I know that over an extended period of time, if I'm in an S&P 500 index fund, which is the broad, U.S. stock market, if I look at over like a 30, 40, 50-year period, U.S. stocks are going to do 9%, right? So part of the reason why I don't invest in New York, a part of the reason why the property that I have in LA, I don't technically consider an investment. That's just my own, my own little personal fun pad. I don't consider that an investment. But a part of the reason I don't invest in expensive markets is because the returns are not to my liking. In my mind,
if I'm going to get sub 9%, if I'm going to get under 9% in terms of a return, I'd rather just be lazy and park that money in the S&P 500 index. Why work as hard as we work as real estate investors? I mean, it ain't easy being a landlord, right? It's not. I mean, you get headaches, you get phone calls, you get problems. Your tenant then poured cement down the drain. One of the kids put a comb down the toilet. You know, things happen as a real estate investor. So for that extra work, I have to have a premium above what the S&P 500 does. So it used to be, my number on that used to be, I have to get all of my money back in 5 years. And in Philly, I could nail it 100% of the time, which is wild, right? So that means I could get a 20% return on my investment when I was investing in Philly. The last investment that I bought in Philly, the last rental property I bought in Philly was in 2018. And I only got a 14% return on that. And I said, okay, I'm out. I tapped out. The last rental property that I bought was that property in 2018. And I stopped buying because our market was getting flooded with new investors. Some New York money was coming from up the turnpike investing here because it was significantly cheaper here. And the returns were better here. So we started having a lot of out of town investors coming in. So for me, next time I look for an investment, I'd be willing, just because housing prices have changed drastically since 2018, as long as I could get better than what the S&P 500 is doing. So I'd need at least a 10% or better return. If I could get that, then I'll start investing again. But what I've been doing over the last several years, so I was aggressively buying between 2011 and 2018. I was buying as much as it was so cheap. I was going to Philly tax lien auctions and buying properties for $6,000, $7,000. And I bought so much that I didn't have the capacity or the capital at the time to renovate all of them. So in 2018, when I stopped aggressively buying, I just went back to all of the inventory that I had just sitting there, and I started working on getting those renovated. So as prices were going up continually because people were still buying, I was focusing on rehabbing my existing inventory. I still have 3 buildings right now that I need to go back and renovate. My goal was actually to finish them this year, but then COVID hit. And Philly rehabs actually got shut down for quite some time.
You talked about tax lien auctions. Is that primarily where you get your leads and buy from, or is it across several different platforms or places that you come up with these leads?
Yeah, I'm all over the place. I've bought properties from tax lien auctions. I've bought properties right off the MLS, the regular listings. I buy a lot of properties from wholesalers. So they're like unlicensed agents who basically take a cut from the spread between what was promised to the seller and what I agreed to buy it. But usually my best deals are word of mouth deals. I talk a lot about real estate on social media, and early on I was talking a lot about real estate because I wanted people to know that I'm in real estate. Your auntie want to sell a house, your grandma want to sell her house, y'all about to lose your house because you ain't paid them damn taxes. Hit me up, So I was one of my best deals. A guy in my office actually had a client, and he's like, "Look, I know you buy in the hood, so my client got a property she's trying to sell." And it's funny because he kind of said it as like a jab. I work with all white guys, so he came in my office, was like, yeah, I know you in the hood and all, so I got this property. So I said, where is it? And he doesn't know Philly. He lives out in Swarthmore, out in the suburbs. And I said, where is it? And he didn't realize that where he was telling me the property is an absolute gold mine. So main campus dorm at Temple University is at Broad and Diamond, right? So that's 14th and Diamond. There's, it's technically 14th Street. This particular property was at 19th and Diamond, so 5 blocks from Temple University's main dormitory. And he's telling me, like, you can buy this hood property from her. I ended up buying that property for $50,000 plus the $6,000 of back taxes. It's a legally zoned multifamily. I still have to renovate it, but after renovation, that property is easily worth $600,000. I'll probably put like maybe $140,000, $150,000 into it. Easily worth $600,000. So, wow. Yeah. Let them. So my point there is, let them say, take their jabs. Let them give you the snide remarks, the comments. Yes, I am in the hood, the ghetto, and go in and restore a community and make a great return doing it.
everybody these days, obviously you're doing it, right? You're proven. But if you look at social media, you turn on YouTube, everybody and their mother is now a real estate expert. Um,
Yeah.
you know, it's the in thing. Everybody's in real estate these days.
Yep.
I know this is not 2011, and you kind of put the brakes on things you said about a couple of years ago in 18.
Yep.
Is it too late to get into this real estate game?
No. I mean, I would make sure that I acquire right, I buy right. You know, I never care about, and a part of the reason I got out of it is because there were so many investors. There were so many bidders. Like I was in bidding war. Like every property I was like bidding on, I was in a bidding war, and I don't do bidding wars. When I'm looking at and evaluating a deal, I don't care what their asking price is. Like that's your business. How much you want for this property is between you, your spouse, and your maker, right? They ain't got nothing to do with me. When I buy a property, the numbers have to work for me. So if I'm a new investor and I've got capitals, I've got cash, and I've got credit, I'm going to make an offer based on what will work for my numbers, my returns. And if that means I've got to throw out a bunch of offers, if I got to get licensed as an agent because realtors are sick and tired of submitting 50 offers for me that they know won't get accepted and they don't want to do it anymore, go get your real estate license and submit the offers yourself.
There you go.
So is it too late? Absolutely not. You just got to make sure that when you acquire, you do it at a price where it will make your numbers work. So no, it's not too late. One of the things and I think you brought up a really good point, Shawn, is that there are a lot of gurus out there, right? There's a lot of gurus in the real estate space teaching classes, courses. I think that you just want to make sure that you're careful about like who you're taking advice from. You know, this in the age of, everybody got a Gumroad's class and they're a guru and they're teaching. I would make sure that I'm working with someone that can show you that they've had proven results. Let me see some of those HUD statements. Let me see, like I ain't saying that they're going to show you their bank account and that's a bit much, but they should be able to show you some documents, like how many HUDs you got, brother. How many properties have you purchased? I mean, HUDs don't give, too much information. Like I want to see some of the results, and I don't think that that's too much to ask.
Speaking of having people show you documentation, I think one of the things that scares people most about getting into real estate are these damn contractors.
Listen.
Finding a great, and you still have to rehab a couple of your properties.
Yep.
Can you talk to us about what qualities you look for in a potential contractor? What should people have their antennas up? Because all of these contractors run around and they scream, I'm licensed, I'm bonded, but truth of the matter is they're working under somebody else's license. They're showing you pictures of work that they probably didn't do. And then people get burned. They walk off the job 2 weeks into it and then demand more money to come back. Yeah. So can you speak to some of your experience? And this is why I love having people like yourself on the platform, because you've had so many years, of experience. You can speak from firsthand knowledge. It's not something you read. It's not something that, I think that this is the way it is. You can give real advice because I've been there, I've dealt with these issues, and this is what I've learned.
You know what, Shawn, it's so funny that you say that because I say repeatedly that finding and hiring and keeping good contractors is one of, by far, the hardest parts of investing in real estate. Folks used to ask me all the time, where do you get your contractors from? And I would jokingly say, I call down to hell and ask Satan to send up whomever he can spare. It's hard out here. And just like I just said, if you have a realtor that's tired of submitting offers that they know won't get accepted, go get your real estate license and do it yourself. That's literally what I did as it pertains to finding a general contractor. I got so fed up and burned so many times that about a year and a half ago, I think, maybe 2 years ago, I went out and got my GC license. Because even the contractor that I had been working with, I mean, this dude had done multiple properties for me. And I don't know if it was I can't tell you if it was jealousy or if he started doing heroin or a combination of both. Like, he literally completely derailed. Our relationship derailed. He burned on that last job. He burned me bad. And it taught me a very valuable lesson because I started to trust him so much that I was way ahead of that payment schedule. And I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, I went out and got my GC license simply because it is so hard to find a really, really good contractor. Some of it is, and you brought up a really good point. You'll have folks that have an Instagram page of their work, and they were the dude who was like the cleanup crew, right? He's telling you that, yeah, I did this whole house. Like, bro, no, you took the nails out the studs. Like, that was your job. So you never really know who's doing what on a job. So even someone who's got pictures or someone who even comes referred to you by someone else, you may not know what their role was in that rehab. So some of it is just experience. I generally tell new investors, do not take on a full gut job rehab as your first project, right? So, a part of the issue is like, some people want to like, they see the work, the type of rehab jobs that I'm doing in Philly. I mean, you like literally there's a front wall. You walk in, there's no house. I mean, there's no back wall, there's no roof. Like there is nothing. It's a convertible house, a shell. To take something like that on as a new investor with no relationships, you don't know the contractor, that can be very, very risky. So how I built my team initially, I started out with cosmetic renos. Like we ripping out carpets, we painting, we like maybe doing like a little bit of an upgrade to a kitchen bathroom, and you start to formulate and you start to build your team over time. A part of the reason why I was able to go out and get my GC license, and really the thing about being a GC is you have to have really good relationships with subcontractors. So by the time I had a couple plumbers on file, by the time I had a couple drywall guys, a couple roofers, a couple electricians, a couple HVAC guys, so I had those relationships already. So when I got my GC license, it was really just about managing people. I just became literally a professional babysitter. I mean, you got professional plumbers, master plumbers who will be in there fighting and arguing with an electrician. Like, y'all two grown men. And I got to come in here and like, you yelling at him because he put his ductwork where you were supposed to, like, so, a lot of being a general contractor is making sure that you can just manage people, manage schedules, manage a project. But it's tricky and risky. One of the things that I tell new investors all the time is don't get ahead of the payment schedule with your contractor. Like if your contractor fell off the face of the earth tomorrow, you and his surviving spouse or widow, y'all should be squared up. She should know you money. You should know her money. You should be trying to chase her down. But it happens. And what I try to tell people all the time is, if you have a contractor that comes to you and says, I want half the job up front, you start to think like, what 9 to 5? Like, do you start a new job and say, look, I require my first week of pay up front. I know y'all pay every 2 weeks, but it's my first day. Where do I sit? And by the way, I'm gonna need half my check today. Like, because that's how this works. I got bills, right? No, in no world does that exist. And I get contractors and their risk. You get a lot of contractors that do work and they don't get paid. They get burned at the end of the job. I get that. So if you need to see proof of funds, if you need to see some sort of like verifying statements that I have your funds, we can do that. But I'm not paying you before you've done work. I'm going to make sure that you're not out of money on my job, meaning my supplies. If you need material, if you need wood, if you need paint, like whatever you need, I'll make sure that you have that. I don't expect you to come out of your pocket for my materials, but I'm not paying you before you've done any work. And then that's where it requires having in writing, here's what happens, you get paid. Here's what happens, you get paid. Here's what, so very clear, very much in writing. I think the other thing too is, we have to respect the work that contractors do. We always want to like talk a contractor down, or we want to go with the cheapest guy. That may not be the move. That may not be the best bet, because what happens oftentimes is contractors, like, they said they needed this and they already underbid the job because they don't know how to price jobs effectively more often than not. And you done talk them down, and then suddenly they've run out of money on your job. So then they got to disappear to go do somebody else's job because they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And then, you done given them money and they're not showing up. So I would say just make sure that you're hiring right, the job is priced correctly, and you're not paying them before they've actually done the work that they said that they're going to do.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. And this is why I'm so impressed, and I needed to get you on this show. Did you say you went and got your general contracting license?
Listen, Shawn, I be out here in my pickup truck. I'm a whole GC. I'm a whole GC out this piece. Yeah, I take this stuff very seriously. Yeah, I've got a general contracting company. We only do our own work. We don't, I ain't doing nobody else's rehab. Like I ain't got time for that. But yeah,
here's the point I'm trying to make. Again, there is more than 8 hours in a day while you are sitting home, whoever you are, and you are telling yourself, I don't have the time, or I cannot do X because I need Y and Z, or I cannot do A because I've been burnt by B and C.
Yep.
You're living proof. You got a full-time job. You're investing other people's money. So you have to take that serious because that's a bunch of people looking at you like, I can't lose my money.
Yep.
So I got to believe when you're at your full-time job, you are there 100%. But outside of that, you built this portfolio of 39, 40 properties, almost 50 units, and still found time. Hey, I'm having a difficult time with these contractors. I'll do it myself. Yes, it's going to require a little more time out of me. Now I'm a professional babysitter, but at least I know the job will be done right. I'm so happy you brought that up because people give themselves an easy way out all the time. And you are just showing, look, my bank account reflects my effort because that's really all we have control over is the level of effort we put into what we say we want. So I'm so happy you brought that up.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, that's my nights, that's my weekends. But see, I truly enjoy this stuff. You know what I mean? So, for it may not be real estate for everyone. I love seeing a house go from what it was to its full potential. I love when the neighbors come over and say, man, like, can we see inside? Like I haven't seen that house look that nice in the 30, 40 years that I've been living here. So I love that stuff. So for me, it's not, some of it, it gets on my nerves sometimes, like, you're dealing with the city and contractors and all that stuff. So there are headaches, of course. But I love this stuff. I love the returns. I love seeing the process. So, for some people, it may be, I've got a buddy of mine. He just got into the vending business, and he's so excited about that. Now every time he goes in somewhere, he's like, "Oh, that's a state of the art equipment right there. They got that good stuff." So, you got to find something that excites you. So I do what I do because I love restoring. I love fixing communities that look like they did when I was a kid. So it doesn't, I'd say it doesn't feel like work because that's so cliche, but I'm happy to spend my nights and my weekends doing a lot of this stuff. And I won't always, Shawn, I'm actually doing too much. I even do my own property management. I don't have a property management company. Tenants text me directly.
Are you serious? Even to this day?
To this day. I do all of my own stuff. And some of that I need to, at this point, finally delegate, especially since I'm going to be spending more time out in Los Angeles. So I have a plan. My goal was, once I finish these last 12 units that I need to complete, I was going to use the revenue from those to pay a property manager and cover additional expenses, that kind of stuff. So when they're done, I plan on hiring someone full-time who works in-house to do all of my management. I'll probably outsource them to do management for other investors because I'm doing a lot. But I like working, so.
Okay, you are doing a lot. And as an entrepreneur, I think that we all get so engrossed in our work. We're laser focused because you set one goal, and by the time you complete it, you already have 3 additional that's in your head that you're already working on. Can you talk to me about some of the sacrifices you've encountered over the years? Obviously, you are doing a lot. But again, you're working within the same 24 hours that I am and everybody else is. There's something in your life that is falling through the cracks. What is it, and what would you tell any entrepreneurs coming up? Look, I've been wildly successful, but keep your eye on the prize in this area as well.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I tweeted something that went viral back in December 1st of 2019. And my tweet was, I sacrificed my 20s. I worked 60 to 80 hours a week, my entire 20s. And then at 41, I'm willing to buy I'm able to buy almost anything that I want. And I said something like, I'm still waiting for that regret to kick in. And there were varying responses to that tweet. I got the folks who kind of had that Mamba mentality, Kobe was a beast. You know what I mean? He had very much, he was 100% drive and work ethic. And there are people who can understand and appreciate that. And then you kind of had this anti-hustle porn culture, right? You ain't got to work that hard. Why you got you need balance, everything in balance. And for me and how I kind of promoted that was, I'm cool with working hard early in life. I'm cool with I don't work as hard today as I did back in my 20s. I'm not doing 80-hour weeks anymore. A lot of this, while it sounds like a lot, I put a lot of things on kind of autopilot. All of my renos, for example, are literally full gut job rehabs at this point. So, what's my tenants really, what are they really calling me about? You got a brand new house, all new plumbing, all new electric, all new HVAC, you got a brand new roof, all new windows. What we got to talk about at this point, other than is your rent in by the 5th? So a lot of my life is in fact on autopilot. Most stockbrokers don't really work that hard. Once you got a client base, I was pounding them phones trying to get new clients. Once they trust you, I don't have to watch the stock market every day all day, every day for the stock market to do what it's going to do. It will work whether I'm sitting there, watching screens or not. It's still going to do what it's going to do. So a lot of that is in fact on autopilot, but have I made sacrifices that some people aren't willing to do? Sure. So, I'm not married. I don't like people, a lot of people who were commenting on that. Well, where your husband, girl? Where your kids? You know what I mean? That's not there are different things that are important to us. There are different things that we value. I am no more or less of a woman because, of the decisions that I made. My dogs are my kids, my houses are my kids. And, I focus on what's important to me. When I want to date, I date. When I don't, when I don't feel like being bothered, I go somewhere and count my money. That's I do.
I do what I do. Aisha.
Listen, I do what I do. You do what you do. So it's interesting, particularly when a Black woman talks her shit. You know what I mean? When a Gary Vee says, and sometimes I'll say very similar to things to what he says, and it's received very differently when a white man says it versus when a Black man, when a Black man or a Black woman, when they say it, or even a Black man, when, we talk about this Mamba mentality and we talk about the ethic and drive that Kobe had. But when a Black woman says it, it's where your husband at? Where your kids at? You know what I mean? It's you just said you love the Mamba mentality, but not when I say it. You don't like my Mamba, but you. So I focus on what's important to me. I try to make sure that I have no regrets. My grandmother in the final years of her life, she passed last May. She was sick towards the end. My freedom and flexibility afforded me the opportunity to help my mom immensely. I got to take my grandmother to a lot of her doctor's appointments. I could blow out in the middle of the day to make sure that, I sat there in her doctor's appointments with her. I sat in the hospital with her for days. Me having the flexibility to be able to do that, that to me is worth everything. I'm my boss, I'm the boss. I don't have to call someone and say, hey, can I take some time? That to me is important. That to me is balance. But to each his own.
I'm on this mission for a relatively simple purpose. When I was coming up, born and raised in the South Bronx, it looked like Beirut.
Yep.
I made it out. God bless me. And I tried to do what I do and speak to people like yourself. Because number one, like you like me, you said it earlier, the people who were doing well in our communities, they were drug dealers.
Yep.
And that's just what it was. It's no knock. That's what it was.
Yep.
But now the face of success has changed. And my background's in music. It's in marketing. But I never was a guy who was in front of the camera, in front of the microphone. It never interests me. And I just want to educate and I want to inspire people who look like me and come from the same impoverished neighborhoods as I come from.
Yep.
So before we close this out, I'm just curious, what's your motivation? Why do you do what you do? Why is it so important for you to educate at the level that you're educating? Because you could simply be a multimillionaire off on a yacht somewhere with your feet up, but you're making a conscious effort to give back to that same hood that you spoke about again and again and again in this very interview. You're not running away from your people, and you're giving back to them. It's that old saying, you can give a man a fish and he'll eat for a night. You teach him to fish and he'll eat forever. Yep. You're teaching our people to fish. Why is it so important to you?
That's a great question. I personally believe it's our responsibility to. I believe that, like, if you made it out of the hood, right? If you made it out of the trauma that is poverty, right? Because poverty is traumatizing. It is like we went through some shit we should have never seen in our lives. Right? You know, as kids, like we shouldn't have seen a lot of stuff that we saw. You know what I mean? We shouldn't have known what crack valves were as kids and kicked them. Like there's a lot of stuff that we should not have been exposed to. I believe that if you make it out of the circumstance that is poverty and leaves Black and brown people completely open to being killed by police officers, being marginalized, being the last to being hired, the first to be fired. I believe if you make it out of those circumstances that are poverty, it is your responsibility to go back and teach people how to do the exact same thing that you did, right? Because otherwise, we all lose. You know what I mean? Like, I'm out here trying to normalize Black wealth. That doesn't look like you have to be an actress or an actor, or you have to be a professional athlete, or you have to be a drug dealer. People who are normal people who you wouldn't otherwise recognize from anywhere other than she out here getting it. He out here just getting it legally and out here teaching people how to do the exact same thing. I've been reading a lot. I don't know if you've ever heard of the gentleman, Dr. Claude Anderson, right? And he talks about the benefits and power of group economics and group wealth, you know, us as a people. And, you know, right now we're in arguably one of the biggest elections that we'll probably see in our lifetime, right? This upcoming November. And Dr. Anderson talks a lot about voting powers and political power and voting rights. And quite frankly, you have to have economic power in order to have the political success that is needed for us to be able to basically be able to lobby with our voices and lobby with our dollars the way that corporations and other communities have been able to. And I think that's one of the things that's lacking. That economic power is one of the things that's lacking, grossly lacking in our community. And that's one of the things that little old me is trying to promote. Because if I can touch or reach or impact 5 people, 10 people, a dozen people, 1,000 people, however many people I impact them, and they can go out and impact 5 or 10 or 20, you know, however many people that they can impact. I believe that's how we'll start to turn this thing around. We'll start to change this thing.
Aisha, where can my audience find you at?
Yeah, I'm on socials quite a bit. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is my name on both at Ayesha Selden. I wrote a book recently that is really for new investors. It's more of a mindset book. It's called Mud to Millions. You can actually get it on Amazon. And the 2 is the number 2. You can actually go to my website, mud2millions.com, and either buy a digital copy directly from my site, or you can it'll direct you to Amazon where you can buy either a paper copy or Kindle version.
Did I hear that right? Mud, M-U-D, to millions?
Yep, Mud to Millions. That's where I got it from, straight out the mud.
There you go. There you go. Aisha, this has been my pleasure. I've learned so much, and, you know, I've watched you from afar, and just having the opportunity to sit and talk to you, this conversation has been everything and more that I hope that it would be. You are a true power move maker, and I thank you so much for your openness and willingness to share.
Thank you, brother.
What's up, guys? Thanks for sticking with me to the end of the video. Truly appreciate you. If you like anything you heard here today, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you know anybody that can benefit from this message, feel free to share. Peace and love.